Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a great holiday. Um, my name is Judith Hospitalis, and I have the J. Hospitalis Law Firm, where I focus primarily on immigration law and all things immigration. I'm located at 224-10 Linden Boulevard, and that's in Cambria Heights, Queens, New York. And I'm a solo practitioner. I just opened uh, shortly, a few months ago, and I was a former officer with USCIS for a number of years, and I did that for quite a while. Prior to that, I was a district attorney in the Bronx and also a practicing attorney, private bar. So I'm back again in my old haunts as an immigration practitioner and loving it. I'm enjoying helping out clients and customers and, talking to people about their immigration woes and their issues and, trying to help people as much as I can. As a lot of people probably know who've listened to my show or who've come into my office, I left the service because I really wanted to be out there and, make a difference and help people with their immigration questions. And at this time, where we're having so much controversy and back and forth, I felt it was a good, time to do that. So in the new year, I want to stay, somewhat positive. I'm trying to keep everything, going positively in that direction for 2019. I hope everyone has made their New Year's resolutions. We all make them, and I just kind of make them as hopes and aspirations rather than firm promises to myself. This way, there's not that added pressure of if you don't necessarily keep up with everything, somehow feeling that you're a failure in that respect. So, promises and aspirations is where I like to take it. But what it is I want to continue in my service to the community. I want to be more active out there and engage with people in all places and spaces. And so that's one of my major goals this year is to do more networking and get out of the office, the comfort zone, and actually go out there, perhaps do some speaking engagements, maybe some teaching. That's the plan. So we'll see how it goes. I love the new year. It's clean slate, new beginning. And, hopefully everyone feels the same way, that it's a chance to start again, start fresh, leave the negativity behind, and, just start with good vibes all around. But of course, we do have, the current affairs going on, and everyone, all things immigration, people are interested in what's going on. Of course, we always have a lot of stuff going on in immigration. Seems as though there's always controversy, topsy-turvy, especially with this current administration. There is always something new, changing, in flux, and we just have to keep abreast of that. And what I always say, knowledge is power. So that's why I do this, weekly show to just keep everyone updated. In case you have questions, I like to be a source of information and inspiration to everyone to keep that hope going, to legalize your status if you can, fix your status, straighten it out, answer those questions if you have them. And, again, I'm on all social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, it's New York City Immigration, and on Twitter, it's New York City Immigration 1. If you have any questions and you want to speak to me, my number is 646-943-4371. You can also contact me, on my direct messaging, Instagram, Facebook. I always respond. Maybe it's not the same day, but usually within 24 hours, I try to get back to, everyone who asked a question. So if you have any questions, anything that you desire to know about immigration, or, your status, your state, what you can do in the future, what the possibilities are, you can come and see me at my office or contact me, on any of the media that you choose. Also, I have the website, J. Hospitalis Law Firm. That's JHOSPEDALES lawfirm.com. You can look at my website, read the story about me, a little bit of, background history, so you can see what my experiences have been in the legal game. And I also list some prices on some of the types of cases that people might want to pursue, so you can look at that and gauge what the pricing might be. It also lists some of the USCIS fees for certain applications as well. Okay, so what I want to talk about today, during the holiday, we had a couple of things happen. Of course, we know the two children that passed away, in the month of December, horrendous, in the custody of Customs and Border Patrol, coming in with their parents, attempting to apply for asylum, from what we know. The little girl, the first one to pass, Jacqueline Cowell, she was taken back to her home for her burial on Christmas, and supposedly they did an autopsy, and supposedly what she died from was dehydration. Shamefully, it seems as though she was in custody for quite some time, didn't receive enough water to drink, not enough food. There's some back and forth about this. Her dad indicated that she was very healthy throughout the trip, that they didn't really travel in the hardship that is traditional. They travel with the caravans, but they mostly travel by bus, and she was well fed and well cared for and well taken care of. So he indicated that she was in very good health throughout the trip and in good spirits. But according to what we've heard, once she came into the detention custody, and she was transported back and forth on various buses and different types of transportation, she got ill, and she then passed away. And it seems as though there was some discussion as to how long it had been since she received any kind of food, water, or care or examination. Once people have gone through those desert conditions, no matter whether they've gone on the buses or if they've walked, it's a really arduous trek, about 2,000 miles in the desert. Very difficult, very hot, over 100-degree weather most times, most days. So you're talking a little child with, very small body mass. So it's very easy for a kid to become dehydrated in those conditions. And it's not automatically, known or understood at the, right then, because it doesn't always happen right away, where you can view it. Sometimes people get dizzy, their lips may be parched, they get disoriented. But sometimes children, it may not be entirely clear that that's what the situation is, and perhaps people were, I'm sure it was a lot of chaos and a little confusion, language barriers, and all of these things. So, heart-wrenchingly, this child passed away, in this time. And, my heart bleeds for those parents, the family, because, of course, the father, there's a lot, that a lot of guilt and all of that associated with the death of your child. And in this kind of situation, it must be doubly difficult to endure. So, they took her back to her home village, and they did put her to rest in her home village. The second child who passed away, Felipe Gomez Alonso, and he passed on December 24th, Christmas Eve day. And, he also was in the custody of Customs and Border Patrol. He came in also with his dad, and from what we are hearing, the dad received some rumor or heard something that they were allowing people in with children, and so he pushed forward from Mexico, which is where they were camped for a while, in a small town where there had been some deportees who had lodged there. So they decided to go forward, hearing this rumor that the United States was allowing people in with children to claim asylum. And so they presented themselves. And once they were taken into custody, the child became ill. They did take him to a hospital, and he received some medication and was released after some observation, and I believe it was about 3 days or so, they observed him and they released him. Once he was released, however, he didn't get better, and he continued to become sick, feverish, and disoriented, vomiting, and exhibiting other symptoms. And he was taken back to the hospital, but he did not survive. And from what the autopsy stated, he had a flu. So, unfortunately, we've had 2 children who pass away during this December time. And initially, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, took a hardline stance on this. And of course, our president, I'm sure everyone heard, the statements that he made. However misguided they were, about, blaming whomever was at fault. But in the interim, since then, we understand that they are now going to be placing some further guidelines on medical care or caretaking of children in custody. Hopefully that is true. Many children do come through those borders. Many children have been detained, as we've seen, throughout last year. And this has been something that has been historic. It's not new. The kids come in either with their parents or even by themselves. I just finished reading this book called Enrique's Journey. Fantastic book. And, if you have time, try to read it. It tells the story of this little guy who decided to follow his mother, who was here already in the United States and had crossed many years ago. And she left his sister and this young boy behind with the family members to make a better life for them here. But he and his sister continued to miss her. They grew up, they continued on, and they still had a lot of issues because of the loss they felt of their parent, their mother's love. The father was there, the fathers were there, their other grandparents were there, aunts, uncles, but it wasn't enough for them. And this young boy decided that he needed to be with his mother. So it tells the story of his long journey into the United States, traveling on railroad cars and various buses and other events. It was a very, very difficult trek. He got sent back several times, stops and starts. I think it was something like 7 times he had to attempt to cross, and he finally did make it. But when he got to the United States and met his mother, she finally paid for a smuggler to bring him through the end of the journey. Once he was able to get in contact with her, it wasn't all champagne and roses, or peaches and cream, or whatever you want to call it, whatever metaphor. It wasn't such a easy relationship. The reconciliation was not as sweet as both of them had hoped it would be, because there were these underlying feelings of one, the guilt from the mother, and 2, his feelings of abandonment and anger and resentment, because the mother had already started, she had another child, she had a relationship with another man. And so it just became it was very difficult, because he had already grown up a lot on his own and with other family members, so he faced a lot of resentment. So if you have the time, read the book. It tells a really good tale, a good story. It's a true story, and it gives you a lot of insight into what a lot of these young people face when they're trying to cross that southern border, and what they struggle through. And I'm sure a lot of other kids can relate, even those who don't have to go through the physical border crossings, but can relate to separation from their parents when the parents come to the United States and leave the children behind in the home country in order to provide a better life for them. The children sometimes do build up those feelings of abandonment and resentment, and it's their feelings. Unfortunately, it happens quite often. Kids, even though they in their head understand the reasons that the parents do come to the United States, in their heart, it's difficult for them to go through that experience and feel that they don't have that parent with them when they need them most. So this kid did, decide to come to meet his mother. Eventually, it turned out okay, but it wasn't, this great meeting and, happily ever after kind of story. Try to pick it up if you can. It's called Enrique's Journey. So now on to the shutdown. So as we know, we're already in week 2 of the federal shutdown. It doesn't really, unfortunately, seem as though we have a compromise yet. The House new members got sworn in today. We're hoping that they will have another discussion. There was an invite to the White House. It didn't seem as though, anyone's willing to budge at this moment. So we do have quite a bit of the government that is shut down at this moment. And we don't really know what's going to happen. So I'm just going to give you a few of the updates on, the agencies and all of that, because I know a lot of people have outstanding immigration issues or they're pursuing or thinking about pursuing, so they want to know, what they can expect while this partial shutdown is taking place. As far as the immigration courts are shut down at this moment, except for those cases that are detained. Detained individuals will have their hearings proceed however they were scheduled or whenever they were scheduled. So there will be no delay in those cases. The immigration judges have been called back that handle the detained case dockets, and so those cases are moving. So if you do have, a case or a family member or friend who is detained at this moment, their cases will proceed, even though the immigration courts are technically shut down. That was the decision EIR made. The agency decided they could not hold the detained cases, just because of the shutdown. However, the cases that are non-detained, that even means those people who are on release programs with ankle bracelets or monitoring or check-ins and all of that, they are considered non-detained. And so those individuals, if their cases are scheduled during the period of the shutdown, they will receive new scheduled dates, probably at least a year away, to be honest, because they already have a backlog of nearly 1 million cases at this moment, and the new filings are not being scheduled. So anything that came in at the time that the shutdown occurred, or since then, that's just being placed kind of in these bins. The attorneys, we just go in there, we put the cases in the bins, and they will be scheduled once the government reopens for work, for business fully. So right now, those cases are just sitting there. And you're talking, those new cases, the cases that are going to be rescheduled, plus we already have the backlog. So, it's good news for some, bad news for some, however you look at it. If you had a case that you felt was really great and, you had a court date, perhaps, people are upset about that they may not get their day in court that they were expecting in the near future. Some people are very happy about this because it gives them more time to either prepare a better case, firm up their ties, ties to the community or family ties, or, put the packets together with the paperwork or get an attorney. So, good news for some people. But that's the way it stands right now. So, the offices are pretty dark right now. You go down to Federal Plaza, the floor where the courts are, it's pretty shuttered. Varick Street is operating because those are where the cases are detained. They're not transporting people for the most part to Varick Street if they're not lodged there. They are doing it by video. So since they stopped that, since the riots happened back in the summer, they have not really been transporting people actually to Varick Street, where most of the detained cases are being usually heard. So at this point, detained cases all across the country are still on the docket. Judges are still moving those cases. but of course the judges are overwhelmed and overworked because they're not getting paid. So that's, the caveat. The IJs are working, but no pay. They're, the detained cases are, the judges are being labeled essential services, and so they've been recalled. The trial attorneys as well. They've been recalled in that are handling the cases that are detained. Anything that's not detained, no trial attorneys are working. I have a lot of friends who, do that side of the aisle work, and they're trial attorneys, but they're home right now. Jealous a little bit, but not really, because they're not getting paid. So, unfortunately, the shutdown means a lot of agency people are working, but not getting paid for it. So just to be, let you know, if you have a date for a court hearing, but you're not detained, your case will not be heard now. It will be rescheduled. So no, don't fear that you don't go in, or if you have a lawyer and they tell you no, don't come in. That's true. They will reschedule your case at another date, and it'll probably be at least a year. May not be even with the same judge, because the judges are so backlogged. They just hired a bunch of new attorneys, new judges, so they may move those cases to new dockets. But we'll see what happens. There's a million odd cases on the backlog as it is, and so we have even more now from this new group that's being filed now, that it's just sitting in these bins at the courts and not being scheduled. So we are keeping our hopes up that things will start to progress. Hopefully someone will talk to someone else. I don't want them to give him $5 billion for a wall, but hopefully there'll be some compromise in this seemingly uncompromisable situation, because right now no one wants to budge, and everyone's showing their strength. So we'll see how this works. But we do have a lot of government workers who are either working without pay or at home not working right now. So as far as the courts, only detained cases are on the docket and moving at this moment. Non-detained cases are not moving. So just wait to hear more. I'll keep you updated. Now, as far as Customs and Border Patrol, they are working at the borders. They're called essential services for the most part, and that's most things. If there are some, caveats to that, some people have applications, different things that they require at the border to be processed. Those things may be limited because the staff is going to be limited because they're not being paid either. They're operating but not being paid. As essential services, they are required to perform even during the shutdown, but no funds, no appropriations have been allotted to Department of Homeland Security or other agencies at this moment who did, if they didn't have budgets that were passed before the shutdown. So, CBP is working, but, they're not being paid, so there's some limitations as to how they're functioning. Now, as far as ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement people, the guys at the airports, or the deportation enforcement people that come knocking on doors or picking people up, in courtrooms and streets and all that, they are working. They're operating, but again, not being paid. They are also, essential services. So pretty much the law enforcement segments are essential services for the most part. And they are working without pay at this moment. So, we don't know how long that's going to be, but usually that's what happens during these shutdowns. The essential service officers are called out. And then once Congress, comes back at it and everyone agrees, they will refund and, pay back pay. But it takes a while. The last time, when I was in government and this happened, a lot of the individuals who were not paid, it took them a couple of weeks before they did get their money. So people are not thrilled about that, of course, because it seems as though they're using the federal government as a weapon each and every time. We've had, what, 3 or 4 shutdowns now within a year. It's just quite ridiculous and dysfunctional that this is the way. Maybe if we hold Congress in their salaries, or the president and his salary, although says he doesn't collect it, but perhaps if we held some of them, with their salaries, we wouldn't be so, in this position so often. I don't know, but it seems quite ridiculous that the U.S. government is so dysfunctional at this point, but this is where we are. So ICE agents are operating, so, don't get loose, don't be out there, driving without a license if you know that your status is undocumented. The same warnings I give all the time. Please be careful in driving if you're undocumented or you have, issues with your status. Be careful in the places that you transport yourself, clubs and, certain spaces. Just think twice. If you know your status is questionable, same thing holds true. Just be aware that it happens. It happens, they're not doing it in the courts as much these days because the judges in the various courts have made formal requests that they stop it, but they are waiting outside the courtrooms to still, detain. So they are still pursuing those things. So if people have dates to report in, to check in, you have some individuals who are undocumented but have been released, but they still have to check in every few months. That's still something you have to do. They're still open for business on, that end. So they're still out there, doing that enforcement sector. They're not paid, so, that's just an extra bit of knowledge. They're not being paid, but they're out there working. So, just be careful anyway. Now, as far as if your new employer has to verify, that you have status and what it is, that system is down right now. It's called E-Verify, and that's a system that employers are usually required to check to ensure that the individual is eligible to work in the United States. Right now, that system is not functioning. It is down. It is one of the programs that is funded through this right now, what they're requiring on the budget, and so therefore it is not funded at this moment, so it is not working. So employers have been told to take no adverse actions, meaning no negative actions, if they cannot determine that their employees have the eligibility to work at this moment, to just hold off and wait until it's back up and running. So hopefully employers will take that into consideration if there are any questionable issues on people's paperwork when they're applying for positions. That's E-Verify. That is down. As far as the student exchange visitor information, that's the program that they use to check student status. That is up and running. That will continue. They're working, but they're not being paid, but they're working. So, if they have to check student status to make sure they're verify that they're in eligible status, those systems are working. Customer service, for the most part, under USCIS is working. So if you want to call the 1-800 number, USCIS is funded through fees. So they are usually separate and apart from the other branches of Department of Homeland Security as far as appropriations of funds. They don't rely on the funding of the budget. They rely on funding through the fees that they obtain through applicants in respondents and all of that when they put their applications in. So USCIS overall for the most part is up and running. So if you have interviews, you want to process applications, you want to know if you're going to get your citizenship date to swear in, all of those things are moving forward. Fingerprints, those systems are up and running, they're open. There are a few, small programs. The one that I used to work in, EB5, which is the investors, the people who have to invest either $500,000 to $1 million into a business in order to gain their green card. That was what I did just before I left USCIS. So certain segments of that are not funded at this moment. Certain programs in that, the people who are investing the $500,000. They're usually the individuals who are investing in large scale businesses like Hilton hotels, huge operations. Not the small business people who are investing the million, but those individuals who are in that $500,000 investment range. That section of the program is being held right now. Those applications, they can file them, but they're not being looked at. That part of the program is shuttered right now until this shutdown is resolved. So EB5 portions of that are not working. USCIS, for the most part, is. The other small program that's not working are the, I believe it's the religious worker, but the non-minister section. Those individuals who are filing under that category, those cases are not being heard at this moment. Those cases are on hold until the shutdown is over. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm so happy to have you. Happy New Year to everyone. So USCIS overall, for the most part, up and running. So you don't have to worry if you have your applications pending. You still, if you have an interview schedule, you will still go forward with your interview. Those things are still on target. They're still up and running. I've had people, in the recent days being sworn in as citizens and all of that. So those things are moving along, notwithstanding the backlogs that are still there. That's for a whole other day, but they are running. So, if you need to call, check up on anything, or you're worried if your application is going to process, it's still moving, in the direction that it's supposed to at this moment. Even with the shutdown. Thank goodness, they rely on fees, so that part of immigration hasn't really slowed down. So immigration, the benefits section is pretty much running for USCIS. So please go to your interviews, check in with your lawyers. If you don't have a lawyer, come and see me, and we can still work on your case. So don't hold off. If you have the ability to get your status, you should do so. That's what I, always hope that people will, take from this. If you have a way, or you think you have a way, or you want to find out if you have a way, come and see me, check in. Don't stay in the shadows, step into that light and, ask that question. That's why I'm here. That's why I stepped away from the government, so that I could be, of service to the community and to answer those questions for people when they have the questions about immigration that are plaguing, so many people outside this country and inside the country. People want to come in, people want to, travel, people want to gain their legal status, people want to bring their family members, people want to go to school, all of those things. So if you have those issues, you have those questions or desires, come and see me. Again, my phone number is 646-943-4371. And, my office is on 22410 Linden Boulevard. That's in Cambria Heights, Queens, New York. I have a huge awning out in front of the building so you can see it. It's very visible, bright blue and white awning. And, the name is J Hospedales, Hospedales. And, I focus primarily on immigration law. I do other things here and there. As my clients need it, I, will assist. I do free notary if anyone, needs a notary. That's also a service I provide for the community. I don't charge for that. So if you need a notary, I'm here. But I focus primarily on immigration law. So that's why, I do this weekly so that people can get an update from the comfort of their home, their car, wherever, about the things that interest all of us. And it seems like the world, because immigration is always on everyone's topic. It's the #1 topic that the government is talking about. Every journalist, it seems like it's just a continuous, discussion about, who should come, who should stay, if immigration is good, legal immigration, not illegal immigration, restriction, non-restriction, border walls, whole other story with the crazy border wall, whether it works or not, and the, various changing in the decisions. I was just reading this article, and it was talking about how, the Democrats, maybe 10 years ago, their arguments were a little different than they are now. They keep going back and forth, which is true. Everyone uses immigration as a football, back and forth, and it seems as though they are, once they get to the goal line, they're reluctant to, pass it forward. And I don't really know football terms, so, I try, but I don't know them, but, I try. But it seems as though they continue to play the games of back and forth in the blame game without ever coming to a resolution. We all want, normalized regulations as far as immigration and clear paths to tell people what they need to do in order to gain their status. Right now it's so dysfunctional, so disjointed. If you do not have a lawyer to help you, a lot of times you find yourself in a quagmire, kind of no man's land of what to do. You may put in paperwork, it's the wrong paperwork, and now you're in proceedings in court with limited options, and you find yourself in some kind of deportation or removal system. Or you go to someone who prepares your paperwork, you didn't qualify for the thing that they told you qualified for, or they didn't give you sufficient evidence in the packet, and now it's a mess. Because as I told you a few months ago, they are starting as of September, they are starting to move, USCIS is, towards NTAing, meaning giving you notices to appear. That's the abbreviation for the notice that they will serve on individuals to place them in proceedings if they don't qualify for whatever benefit they applied for, which wasn't the case in the past. If you didn't qualify for something and they interviewed you, it kind of just rested unless they thought there was fraud or misrepresentation of some sort. But things are becoming a lot harsher, with a lot less chances to go forward and be successful. So you take your chances when you file it with someone who is not a practitioner, not a lawyer, or you do it yourself. It's not like the old days where you could just put the form in and you're good to go as long as your case was straightforward. They have this list of what you need as initial documents. If you don't submit it with initial documents, then they can deny your case first, at the first go, without returning your fees, and put you into proceedings. So not to scare anyone, but information is power. And I always say, it's best to be knowledgeable about what could happen and what you should do in a situation. So that's why I stepped out. I saw all of these things happening, coming, and people were asking me questions, and I couldn't really respond in tea parties or luncheons or at the club or whatever. Not that I go to the club, but wherever people always have questions, and I really couldn't respond in all the years, and it kind of bothered me that I couldn't really help in that way. I could only help as much as I could when people were coming before me for interviews or to obtain their benefits, but I couldn't really respond and give real answers to the questions that they had. So I felt that the best way at this point was to step outside and actually do the work of assisting people to present their cases to the government. So now, I've jumped on the other side, which is what lawyers do. We go back and forth. We become advocates for whichever side. And, that's a good thing, because this way everyone is represented with an expert. So hopefully, if anyone has a question or an immigration issue, they'll come and see me and feel comfortable, with telling me their story and allowing me to assist. I feel so honored when people come in and say, they feel comfortable and they're ready to move forward. It's my great privilege, and that's what I set out to do, is actually help people to gain their citizenship, get to that final frontier of gaining that citizenship where they can move about freely and help other people to come in, bring their family members, work in the job that they want to work in without fear of reprisals or repercussions or, any kind of removal, deportation issues. That's the goal. And also to be able to vote in this country and, have representation, right? That's the main goal. To be in a country and live in a country, you want to be able to vote in that country for things that matter to you and affect your life and your family's life. So, okay, of course, I digress, which is what I do. I love, don't get me started on talking about immigration issues because this is my thing. I love it. So again, the shutdown so far, USCIS for the most part is open. It's running, it's operating. If you have a court date, court dates are not going to be taken right now. Only people who are in detention are going forward with their court dates. Non-detained cases in immigration court will not be going forward at this moment. They will receive rescheduled dates at a later time. Those dates probably won't be for at least a year, because of the over 1 million case backlog in the court system right now, plus the new cases that are just sitting in the piles. There's these little bins we go in and we just drop the cases in. And that's what they're doing right now. They're just holding them. No one's getting scheduled for immigration court. USCIS, yes. Immigration court, no. So that's the difference. If you have a benefit case that's just in USCIS and hasn't moved to the courts, your case is going to proceed as normal right now. If your case is with the immigration judge, if you're not detained, it's not going to proceed right now, which is, good or bad, depending on how you look at it. For some, good, because they'll have more time to stay, and right now, that's what they want. They'll be able to work and get their, more ties to the community, build better packages of evidence, and maybe, gain a relationship that they can move forward in to adjust their status. So for some people, that's a good thing. For others who are waiting, for asylum or, they fear of return because of persecution in their country, it may not be such a great thing. They want to have their case heard. They want to, be able to bring people in if people are still over there. So that's a little bit of frustration for quite a few people who are sitting in the that situation where they're not detained but they have asylum cases and they have family abroad who are waiting because they're also in the same boat, but they sent the first person over to proceed in an asylum case, and those cases are not being heard right now. They're being delayed, probably at least a year. So frustration for some people, good news. But this is the situation we're in right now. So ICE is operating, deportation enforcement operating, not getting paid, but operating. Customs and Border Patrol operating, the inspectors at the airports, they're operating, everyone is operating, not getting paid, but they are considered essential enforcement services, so they are operating, but they're not being paid at this moment. So that's, just something to be aware. They're still out there, so just be careful when you're driving, or, going to court or certain situations where there may be some enforcement around, and that you have either an undocumented situation or you have some issues, where there was an arrest or something or other. Just be careful because enforcement is still working, although not getting paid. They're still out there. Department of Labor, where if you have, say you applied through a work petition to gain your adjustment of status, your legal permanent resident status through work, that system is still up and running. They've been funded. They received their budget before the shutdown. So they are still operating. So hopefully, if you're waiting on labor certification, excuse me, those people are still working. So the labor certs, they should proceed. So if that's what you're waiting on in order to, that's an I-140 petition. Usually what happens is if you're going through your employer to legalize your status, In the same way that you might go through a family member, you know, it's another track, but similar process. It would be an I-140, but before you go to the I-140 portion, you have to go through the Department of Labor, who have to certify that there are no U.S. workers eligible for this position. So it's a long process, but if you are waiting in that process, the Department of Labor, which handles that part of it, the certification that there are no U.S. workers eligible, and that the job qualifies for, you know, this certification, that part is working. The system is working. So if you're waiting in the track for your labor certification or your labor petition, the I-140, USCIS is operating. So those things are still proceeding, and that will be, you know, available to you in the regular time frame. But you know, there is the backlog still, so it's not that it's going to be rushed or any quicker. It is still just proceeding the way it would normally proceed. As far as Department of State, that was the last one I wanted to talk about. Department of State is up and running. And Department of State would be if you have, say, people overseas who are consular processing. You know, you're doing family petitions where you are requesting that your family member come from overseas to the United States based on the relationship. Those cases are proceeding. Department of State is up and running. So passports also, those are being issued. They're operating here in the United States to issue passports and visas. They're still working. They were funded as well, so they're open for business. So if your loved one has an interview at the State Department for their visa to come up to the United States, if they're, you know, interviewing abroad, they're still working, so they should still go for their interview. Those dates are still good. There is, of course, backlogs, but it is a shorter track than in the United States. It is a shorter track, but, you know, if you are not there, then you have the option of adjusting in the United States. But right now, Department of State is working, and so they're up and running. So if you need a passport, or, you know, you have someone who's applying for a visa, or, you know, they're going for their interview in order to proceed on an adjustment of status application, not adjustment of status, but a consular process, which is the term for overseas, they will proceed as normal. So right now they're up and running, you know, even with the shutdown. Now, there's another segment called, I don't know if anyone uses this, but the CIS Ombudsman's Office. The Ombudsman was something that was created a few years ago because of the complaints the attorneys had about mistreatment, you know, with USCIS and all the other sections, but mostly USCIS and the benefits and, you know, the back and forth and the delays and all of that. So this Congress created this little section, this department. I did a little stint there for a few months working there, and they prepare a report every year on, you know, how, you know, USCIS has progressed in what they are doing, and, you know, whether they're on track and they're keeping up with their promises and all of those things, or what they need to improve. But they also have a segment where people can send them online requests or complaints about issues. So a lot of times attorneys will check in with them if there's a problem case where USCIS is being, you know, being a little difficult or delaying cases, or there's some issue that the attorney has not been able to work out directly. They will use them as the intermediary. That section is now, it's shuttered right now. They are not fee-based, so they come from the same budget as the other segments of the government. So right now they are closed, so we are unable to check in with the CIS Ombudsman for any online requests or complaints. And they also take them directly from you know, individual petitioners, applicants, and what have you. If people have filed on their own in the past, they will also, you know, and that's a tip in the future. If, you know, if you already filed for something and you have a problem with it, USCIS is not being responsive, or, you know, even with mailing, sometimes the USCIS mails you cards, your resident card, and you never receive it, and there's this back and forth. They assist, or there's the delays and whatever the benefit is. They usually will become the intermediary, and they have an online system that you can put in your, you know, complaint request but right now it's not functioning. When the shutdown is over, then they will reopen. This is, what happens with the agencies that are not fee-based, that are not funded through their fees. They are funded based on the appropriation of a budget, and every fiscal year, which is the end of September, the fiscal year closes, and the new budgets have to be resolved. So if they're not resolved onto the next year, then everything is done. Everything closes because they're not funded. So those agencies that are relying on these budgets, if they're not funded, they cannot operate. And so that's why you have a lot of agencies that are closed, but those who are considered as essential services still have to work, unfortunately, without pay. So you have, such the individuals in the enforcement sectors, the Customs and Border Patrol, the ICE people, the judges who are working on detained dockets, the trial attorneys, the government attorneys who are the prosecutors in the immigration section, who are working on the detained docket. They also called in to work. The others are not. They're home or wherever, but they're not working at this moment. But no one is getting paid in those sections. They, usually Congress does appropriate funds to pay them shortly after the reopening. They have to sign, something indicating that, it's not an automatic. So usually they do it. I don't see why they won't this time, and hopefully it won't take that long afterwards. But it's a tough situation for everyone to know that they're not getting paid, but they must work. And of course we know that there's been a lot of challenges, as far as the border over this past year. There have been quite a few upticks with the and then the children passing away. All of these situations. I heard there was tear gas sprayed Christmas Day or something again at the border. There's been back and forth about why they sprayed it, but they did spray tear gas. So tempers are flaring and all of those things. So I want people to keep that in mind, because these are human beings. Although they have to perform their duties professionally, they are human beings, and so you don't want to put yourself in that line of problems if you can avoid it. So just be aware, be careful when you're stepping out there. If you're undocumented, just have your spidey senses up and beware, and don't take extra chances, don't take extra risks. Don't drive while drinking. Don't drive if your license is suspended. Don't speed, and all of those things. Just keep your senses about you. Be reasonable and be careful out there. If you are waiting on a Social Security card, Social Security is funded. They're up. A lot of times when people are applying for work authorization, newly minted work authorizations, they also need the Social Security card to work. So Social Security is up and running. They have been funded. Their budget was passed before this all occurred. So they are up and issuing Social Security cards. So if you need Social Security for anything, they're also another agency that is up and running. So Department of Labor, the sections that are connected to immigration are working. Department of State is working. USCIS for the most part is working. ICE is working but unpaid. CBP is working but unpaid. The courts, the immigration courts, EOIR, that's the Executive Office of Immigration Review. Those are the immigration courts. They are working, detained docket only. Non-detained cases will not be on now. They will be rescheduled, but they are, the detained people are working. The Justice Department, which are the trial attorneys, the attorneys who are working on the government side, they work under the Justice Department section. Those who work on the detained docket, they're working. The others are not working. So pretty much, some of the government is working because it's required to work, and it's, law enforcement, essential services. Other parts of the government are funded because of fees, so they are up and running, USCIS. And other parts that are not funded but are not called essential services are closed. So just be aware, if you have any questions, any further questions, or you want to check in to be sure that what you're doing or the process you're thinking about pursuing, can still go forward, check in with me. Call me. Again, my number is 646-943-4371. You can come and see me. I'm at 22410 Linden Boulevard. That's Cambria Heights, Queens, New York. And you can check in, send me a direct message on Instagram, Facebook, New York City Immigration. On Twitter, it's New York City Immigration 1. And also my website is up there. It's J Hospedales, that's HOSPEDALES, lawfirm.com. And you can, read up and check in and, get an idea of what you might want to pursue. If you have that ability or you question whether you have that ability, please come and see me. Don't sit at home, get your services. Don't sit and wait and not get your status. Don't hold off. I take payment plans. If you don't have the money up front, we work it out. We work on payment plans. I will work with you every step of the way, because my goal is to get you, in the place where you can get your status and live freely and work freely and walk freely and vote in this country and bring in your family, and so you don't have to be, separated. Again, I was just talking about the book I read, Enrique's Journey. It's a great book, great read. If you have the time, pick it up, take a look. The novel, I forgot the author's name, but she won the Pulitzer Prize for it. Fantastic book, Enrique's Journey. It tells all about this young boy who traveled, through the southern border. It took him maybe 7 or 8 times to get from his home country to the United States, and he followed to join his mom, who had come when he was a little baby, a little boy, and he never forgot, her, even though he had other family members there, along with his sister. He went through a lot of trauma in the home country because of him missing his mother, and so he decided on his own to travel, despite her telling him not to do it. He decided, he was about 12 at the time when, and it's a true story, he was about 12 years old, and I've met quite a few of these kids who have done this, and it's just unbelievable, the journey that they take on their own to trek through these dangerous situations to get to the United States. So people come from all walks of life to, come here. They think it's a promised land, and I guess in some ways it is. In some ways, it's like everywhere else. But you're here. If you're here and you need to gain your status, that's what you want, because you don't want to live in the shadows. You don't want to live in the darkness. It's not a good way to live, and you're always going to be worried and questioning whether this is going to be the day something is going to happen. And if you have kids overseas or family members overseas that you want to bring, it's difficult. So if you have a way to do that, please do. And if you question whether you have a way to do it, then see me. And as I said, I do payment plans. I my goal is to help as many people as I can. So that's what I want to do. And if I can help you in any way, to start that process, then that's what I'm going to do for you. So once again, my story, I tell it over and over. I was a USCIS officer for over 16 years. I was a supervisor in the asylum division for many years, right here in New York. And then I went to Washington to headquarters, and I worked there for about 5 years, doing the appeals of the officers when they denied cases, and people wanted to appeal it to get a second opportunity. I did those cases as well. And then I went to the investment section, where the individuals who want to invest money into businesses, large sums of money, and then they gain their cards through that, their legal permanent residence in that way, which is something I'm going to pursue a little bit more in the future. I'm thinking of new ideas of ways to bring that more into the community, because when I first did those cases, it was just amazing to me that the majority of those cases come from particular countries, particularly China. For the most part, a lot of other countries didn't seem to know about it, and the ways that they can gain their green card through this process. So I'm trying to think of ways to bring that more into the community, and so more to come on that. hopefully this year. That's one of my goals, one of my resolutions for the new year, or my promises to myself, as I say, that I'm going to try, to do more things like that, and figure out new ways to bring it out to the community and help people to get that knowledge about immigration. So eventually what I'm going to do is do more, out in the open things, more things where people can actually, have opportunities to come to a place and meet me and ask questions, do question and answer sessions, and those type of things. So, more to come on that. But that's all I have for you tonight. So thank you again for joining me. And hopefully, we'll do this again next week. But for now, good night. Be safe. And, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.